Today I'm going to show you how to install both the rack and pinion and smart tool upgrades. The first thing that you'll need to do is basically strip everything off the machine. You'll notice we've taken off the X-axis lead screw and the split nut. We've also taken off the Y-axis lead screw and the split nut as well. And then we've disconnected everything from the Z-axis so that we can remove this as well. We'll just set the I-just chain here on the back for a moment while we convert our carriage. You'll notice here at the headstock end we've removed the brackets that support the X-axis lead screw, as well as at the tailstock end. Now we've disconnected everything from the Z-axis. We can go ahead and just slide it off of the carriage. You can see we removed the brackets and even the Y-axis drive motor. So there's nothing on here other than the stops for the limit switches. Now I'm going to go ahead and slide this carriage right off the end of the machine. Now you need to remove this back plate here as well as these glides, so that what you'll end up with is just this part. It just has the front bracket and of course the stops for the limit switches. And we'll take a measuring tape and we'll measure from this front edge right here of the carriage back, and we'll put a mark at 20.5. We'll also mark it here on this opposite rail. I'm going to move this over here to the bench so that when I drive the bracket in, I don't bang on the machine. And we'll take this bracket and insert it into the rails lined up with the marks we made. Now, I'm going to take a block of wood and put here so I don't damage the bracket, and we'll just tap this down into place. Now I'm going to take a locking plate with 1032 hardware, and with the hardware down, we're going to insert it into the rail from the back side here and push this in until we can see it line up with this hole, and then I'm going to use a 1032 round head machine screw, and we'll tighten that in place. Same thing on the back rail. Again, the hardware has to go down. I'll just use a pen to push this in to line it up. And go ahead and tighten these in place. Next, we're going to tune the two glides before we attach them to the bottom of the carriage. And these glides are going to ride on the back rail right here. So we'll set this down like so, and then we'll make the adjustment with this screw. So to make the adjustment, we'll tighten this screw right here and just sliding this back and forth. It should be loose to begin with. And then as you tighten it down, it'll get a little bit more snug. Now we'll continue tightening this down until it's fairly stiff. And then we'll use a wrench to tighten this nut on here, and that will loosen it back up just a little bit as it secures that screw in place. I'm going to apply a little Dynaglide onto this rail because this is where it's going to be sliding. So we'll hit that front edge like that and a little bit on the top. And then these will slide much easier. We're going to mount these glides right here to the bottom of the carriage. And you can see there's a little relief cut right here to go over the head of that screw. It'll be easier to mount these glides if we flip the carriage over and mount them here on the bottom, and then we'll use a 1032 5/8 cap screw and a star washer to secure it on the outside. I'll just put a little pressure on the front of the glide and then tighten that down in place. The slot needs to go down, and the tightening screw or the adjustment screw has to go to the front of the carriage. So it'll be positioned like this. We'll slide it underneath, and again on the inside we'll use a 1032 pan head screw. Be sure that it has the star washer on there. We'll just get that started and then tighten it up with a screwdriver. The stop here is in the way, so I'm going to loosen this up and slide it back, and then we'll put this cap screw on the outside. And again, I'll put a little pressure to push the glide back towards the back, just a little bit. And then go ahead and tighten this in place. And then finish tightening the pan head screw on the inside. Now I'll slide the stop back in place. And it just goes level with the front of the machine, and I'll tighten it up right there. Just make it flush with the front of the bracket and evenly spaced between the two glides. Now I'm going to spray just a little Dynaglide here on top of that felt and also on the glides. Now we'll want to install the roller here on the front of the carriage. So we'll start with a 1032 by 7/8 pan head machine screw, and we'll insert that into the hole here. Now we'll take the roller, which has the little bearing inside of it, and slide that over, followed by the fender washer, a star washer, and then a jam nut. We'll go ahead and tighten that in place, and those will roll. We've completed the assembly, so we'll go ahead and put it onto the machine. Now this carriage you don't need to feed through from the end. You can insert the rollers in the front and then just slide it back until they catch. Now you can adjust the glides right here if you need to loosen or tighten them to tune it so that it glides easily but doesn't have any play in the front. You want to make sure that that roller is halfway in there riding on that rail. If you need to adjust the width of the bracket, then you do that before we go on to the next step. Next we'll put the Z-axis back onto the carriage. It should just slide on here from the front. To mount the rack and pinion, you'll need the 1/4 by 5/8 cap screws with both a star washer and a flat washer. And we'll put them from this side onto a double locking plate. And of course leave that loose for right now. The rack just slides on the end of the extrusion here. Just center it between this rail and this rail, the front and the back, and then go ahead and tighten it in place. This is the Y-axis motor support bracket, and it'll be mounted with two cap screws, 1032 by 1/2 inch cap screws, and it has both a star and a flat washer. You'll find it easiest to insert the screw here from the bottom before you try to attach this to the machine. So I'll just insert those in like so. This will mount in the same place as the split nut mounted here. we'll go ahead and tighten that in place here. You're going to remove the original brackets from the motors and then replace them with these brackets. And they're identical for both the X and the Y. So what we'll do is simply set this over the top of the motor like so, and then we'll use the 1/4 by 7/8 cap screws, 4 of those. Put a jam nut on the back to secure that in place. And then on these 2 brackets, we're going to mount one from the outside pointing in and one from the inside pointing out. So we'll screw these in with the small machine screws provided, and then we'll put a jam nut on the back to secure those in place. Of course, we'll go ahead and put the rest of the screws and tighten these all down. You'll need to replace the coupler that came on the motor with this pinion gear. We'll take this motor that has the coupler facing in and place it here on this bracket for the Y-axis. Before we tighten this motor down, you'll need to make sure that the pinion gear is centered on the rack. There are 2 screws, one on either side of this motor. The one on the near side here simply have a hole, so we'll leave that loose for a moment. The one on the back has a slot so that you can twist this in to engage the gear. So we'll put the second screw in the back side and then engage the gear and tighten it in place. So we'll just twist this in till it engages and then lock that down, and then of course secure the one on this side as well. This is the rack that goes on the back of the machine, and you'll have these little locking plates that need to go back here. Again, the PEM hardware goes on the bottom side. The screw goes through the hole from the top side like so and attaches here. We'll just leave those loose for a moment. Now again, we're working on the back side of the machine, so we'll insert that locking plate into the end of the top rail and slide them in like so. We'll center this middle piece here, and then of course these will butt up on each end, and the whole assembly needs to be centered in the middle of your rail. Now I'm going to tighten this up, but just barely snug. We're going to need to align these seams and make sure that they are the same height and this is pulled together. So we'll secure that next. So we'll tighten one on this end, just a little snug, and we'll tighten this up, but we'll back it off just a little bit so we can still make an adjustment. Then we'll use this alignment tool and center it right here in between, and that'll pull the 2 pieces together and also get the proper spacing on the teeth. And then we can go ahead and tighten that in place. Now we'll just double check and make sure that they're aligned perfectly. It's not the top that matters at all, it's the teeth at the bottom. Make sure they're aligned, even, and properly spaced. We'll put the gear on this shaft as well, and you're going to need to adjust it after you put it in here to align up with the rack. Okay, now on this one, you want this mounted down, so it's going to face like so, and again, we'll use a 1/4 by 5/8 cap screw on either side to mount the motor. And we'll just make this snug because the other side is slotted so that we can adjust it, engage it into the rack, and tighten it in place. Now we'll just roll this up until it engages with the rack, and then go ahead and tighten that in place. Now we're going to mount the bracket to support the IGES chain here on the back. So we'll use the 2 locking plates and the cap screws and washers and insert it like so, and then go ahead and push it all the way back and tighten it in place. Then we'll use the screws that came with the IGES to mount it right here. Now that's locked in place. You can put a zip tie through these holes to secure the IGES chain right here to this bracket. Now we'll go ahead and reconnect all of the cables. You'll notice that we've added the X-axis cable and zip tied it right here to the outside of the IGES chain. And of course it plugs into the tower and then comes up to the carriage. So we'll go ahead and plug everything back in, starting with that right there. And of course each cable is labeled so you'll know where they go. We'll also need to change the bracket that the limit switch for the X-axis is mounted on at this end. So I've taken this bracket off and attached the bracket like so with the 2 cap screws I took off that one. And then we'll mount it right back here on the back side, same as before. I've put power to the tower, fired up my software, so I'm ready to start cutting. But before we can move it, we have to change some settings in the XML file. Let me show you how to do that. Right here on the top menu bar, you want to click on Config, and then come down to Motor and Tuning. Along the bottom of this window are your settings for this motor. And we're starting with the X-axis right here. The first thing that you need to do is adjust the steps per. Yours right now should be around 8,000. You'll want to put in there 636. Now we have 0.8746309, but you'll probably want to put something close to that in and then calibrate your X-axis. But if you want to start with this exact number, it's 636.8746309. Under velocity, we can put this at around 1,500. Acceleration, put it right at about 55. Now once you've done that, you want to click on Save Axis Settings right here. If you don't, you'll lose those settings that you just made. Now click on the Y-axis and do exactly the same thing. We'll put that same number in the steps per, 636.8746309. The velocity, we're going to put this one at around 500 inches per minute. Acceleration, we have in here at 44.75. That's close enough. So once you've entered those numbers, 636.8746309 and 500 for velocity and approximately 45 for acceleration, then you'll save that setting there and then click OK. Next, you want to click on Config again. Go to the bottom of this menu and click on Save Settings. And then let's close the program and then just restart it. And you're still going to be using the Performance CNC. I've renamed mine to the Performance with the R and P, so we're going to use that one. But you'll open this back up using the same profile as before. Of course, hit your system reset here at the bottom, and then you're ready to go ahead and operate the machine. If you have the new OM5 interface, you want to click on the work offsets right here so that you have control of the machine for a moment. And then you can either click these buttons, X, Y, and Z, here, or we can use the keyboard to control the machine. Now when I'm using my keyboards, for example, and I'll hit the left arrow, it's going to move that at up to 1,500 inches per minute. You'll want to drive it back and forth over that seam on the x-axis back there where we put the two racks together, just to make sure it's nice and smooth. Of course, test your y-axis. Now what we'll do is we'll come back up to this screen and hit Machine Setup and click on Set Machine Coordinates, and it will find Machine Home for us. You're ready to start cutting. Now I'll show you how to install the Smart Tool. We're going to start by grounding the router. So you'll need this grounding strap that'll go between this bolt on the face of this bracket and this one right here. We'll just loosen this screw on the top here. Attach the grounding strap. And then tighten that in place. Next, we'll loosen the screw right here. Make sure you don't take these screws clear out. Just loosen them up. Insert the grounding strap and then tighten that down. This is the new harness for the Smart Tool, and so we'll start by attaching the limit switch for the A-axis. Of course, you notice that we removed the A-axis and the X-axis limit switches and the harness that came with the original system to put this on. Make sure that there's a jam nut on the back of this screw to secure that switch. Next, we'll take the stationary Smart Tool and we're going to mount it on the bed rails right here. You'll need to insert the two locking plates into the bed rails, and the only way to do that is to remove your tailstock, slide it clear off the end of the machine, slide the two locking plates in, and then replace your tailstock. Now we're going to take the stationary pad, and with the cap screw and the washer, we're going to move this locking plate all the way up to the end and insert the screw right there, and then go ahead and tighten it in place. This will be a very tight fit, so before we tighten that one up, I'm going to slide this up into place, put the second screw in, and then we'll tighten them up together to lock that in place. Make sure that the Smart Tool, the stationary Smart Tool, is back against the headstock as far as it can go. The X-axis limit switches, of course, mount on the back side of the machine at the headstock and the tailstock end. If you have the rack and pinion upgrade, then your bracket is going to look like this one to properly position this part. If you have the standard with the lead screw, then your bracket's going to look like this one. Since we have the rack and pinion on this machine, I'll be using this set right here. Now we can plug in the mobile puck. It's simply going to insert the jack into this fitting right here. On the OM5 interface, you go to the tool setup, which is right here, this button, in order to use your Smart Tool. Let me just give you a brief overview real quickly. First of all, if you're turning between centers and you're going to use Smart Tool, you simply click on this button right here, Smart Tool A. A is of course the A axis, or the rotational axis. If you're going to cut it flat stock, then you'll turn Smart Tool on this side, and then you'll use this button, the Smart Tool setup, to touch off the mobile Smart Tool first, and then the stationary Smart Tool, and it'll measure the difference so that when you run your programs, all you got to do is insert your bit and go. Okay, the other thing that you can do is, of course, you can turn your Smart Tool off if you're using your tool library, or if you're touching off the part or another method. And so you can turn it on here, here, or turn it off here. On this side, we can use the Smart Tool to set up our library. For example, if you click on this button right here, Reference Tool Touch, make sure that the reference tool is over the mobile puck, or the mobile Smart Tool, and it will lower down and touch that and set your readout to 0. It'll then ask you to change your tool number, and then you'll put your second cutter in, and you'll simply touch this button, Tool Touch Off, and it will lower your cutter down and touch the same pad and automatically write the numbers to your tool tables. So this will greatly simplify your tool table setup. You can set up a whole bank of tool offsets in just a matter of moments. The last thing that you've got right here is this button, which is Zero Tool on the part. So if you have a piece of flat stock, you've got your Smart Tool turned off. You're not going to use it. However, you just want to simply zero the router bit on the surface of the wood or on the surface of the bench or the table. Then you put your cutter in and just touch this button here, Zero Tool on part. It will lower down to the pad, and it'll write this number here to 1.0, which of course is 1 inch above the part, which is the thickness of the mobile pad. So the surface of the wood or the table will actually be 0. Well, that finishes the installation of the Smart Tool. Now you're ready to start cutting.